I'm a hustler, baby.
It's time for Hustle Her podcast. I'm your host, Deshae Keynes. Hustle Her is all about inspiring women through real life experiences that have helped to mold and develop not only me, but my guests into the entrepreneurs and leaders we are today. If you're an enterprising woman determined to succeed and looking for a bit of motivation, a bit of tough love, and some actionable takeaways to be the best you, girl, you are in the right place. Hey guys, and welcome back to Hustle Her podcast. As always, I'm really grateful that you've chosen to spend some time with me today. I want to do a big shout out to our sponsors this year for this season. Actually, this season is Brown & Company as well as 59 Front. 59 Front have some amazing products that we're going to be showcasing in some later episodes that you can head over there and find out some of the products that they have to offer. But make sure you head over to 59 Front on Front Street and see some of the amazing products that they have for us. Super excited about my guests today, and I know, I'm aware, I say that about all my guests, but genuinely, that's what makes them so great, because I'm genuinely excited to interview them. So, my next guest is the non-executive director for financial service companies on Island, Miss Caroline Foulger. How are you?
Hello, Deshae. I'm great, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Great to be here.
Yes, I'm really excited. We were just talking briefly pre-show, and I was like, wait, Caroline, stop. I want you to say all of this on the podcast.
Sure.
So I'm excited to get into more about you, get people to know a bit more about you and your journey, and we'll kick it off.
Okay.
Ready? All right. So we're going to do some quick, what we like to call rapid fires. So first thing that comes to mind.
Rapid fire. Yeah. Okay.
First thing that comes to mind when I ask you the question, and then we'll go from there. Cool?
Cool.
All right. I'm happiest when?
When I'm sitting in the garden looking at the view with my cat.
Okay. And what do you do on a plane?
On a plane, I try to sleep if the time is right, or otherwise I read. I never watch a movie on the plane. Don't really. I think the sound is terrible on a plane, even if you have your own headphones. So sometimes I work, sometimes I read for fun, sometimes I sleep. It really depends.
I know it's nothing like a good airplane sleep when you get a good one, right?
You get a good one, right?
Exactly, I do
That's
agree.
What I quite like at the moment. The Bermuda flight is leaving later. It's much better because I can get to sleep better. Because when it leaves at 8 o'clock, you're not tired till 10:30. Whereas it's leaving at 9:30, and at the moment it seems to be late quite a lot too. So you can go straight to sleep.
Yeah,
that's really
it's a good one. Yeah, it's nice. It's a perfect nap too. It's
Absolutely.
like a good 90
Just
minutes.
long enough. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So tell me a bit about your skincare routine.
Well, embarrassingly, so I didn't know 59 Front was your sponsor, but now I do know. I get my skincare from 59 Front.
Well, look at that.
And that's completely coincidental. So Clinique and Bobbi Brown are the products I like best, and I like Jo Malone perfume, all of which I get from 59 Front.
Amazing. Look at that, just alignment
There you
with
go.
the sponsor.
How did that happen, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. What did you spend your first big paycheck on? Like, what was something you bought yourself?
The first thing I bought myself. When I grew up, when I was I can't remember if I was at school or just at university, but I was doing a casual job in the holidays, and I saved up for a stereo. Now, most of your listeners are probably too young to remember stereos, but this was like a big thing that had a tape deck and a record deck and a radio and big speakers. And I remember it cost £200, which was like $300.
Yeah.
And I think I worked for 6 weeks to
Really?
save that. And every week I'd go and look at it and think, as soon as I've got the money, I'm going to buy this.
Right. And then you finally did.
And I finally did.
Yeah.
And I took it with me when I went to university. It took up like half my room.
Yeah.
But I was so proud of it. It was really great. I had it
How
for
big
years.
was it?
Oh, I don't know, 4 feet by 2 feet or something.
Can you imagine, like, that's how big things were, and then we carry around phones that have
I know,
everything
it's
on it
amazing.
now.
Makes me feel really old. And because you would play what kids now call vinyl, with records on them, and each other record lasts like 15 minutes, and you've got to get up and turn it over and start again.
Really?
Yes. Whereas now you can just, I do this all the time, you might. I put when I go to bed, if I want to sleep drifting off to something, I set the timer for either a book or music, 45 minutes or something like that, and I wake up in the morning, and I've always missed the second half of what I was planning to read.
Every time.
To, right?
I know. It ends up watching or looking at me, whatever that is.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. What does love feel like?
Oh, love. Love feels cozy and comfortable and protected and safe and a really good place to be.
Okay.
Sort of wrapped up, like being wrapped up in a really nice blanket.
Nice. Okay. What are you listening to right now?
Gosh. In terms of music, I'm listening to jazz. So when I was in London recently, I went to a couple of open-air jazz concerts.
Yeah.
And there was a guy playing the music of Quentin Collins. I don't know if you know Quentin Collins. I had never heard him before, but his jazz music is great. So I downloaded some of that from Apple Music, and I've been listening to that quite a bit.
Okay.
And I'm listening to a talking book as well, which I have I always find talking books take me forever because I fall asleep or I'm not in the car or I'm not cooking and then I haven't listened to it for a week or something. I'm listening to a talking book at the moment, which is an old Frederick Forsyth novel.
Okay.
So I really like crime novels.
Ah, okay. Tell me a hidden talent.
Hidden talent.
Or a talent not very many people know about.
That's a tricky one. What about, I think other people will probably be able to tell you that better than me. What am I good at that people wouldn't know? Photography, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. What
It's a
type of
hobby.
photography?
Wildlife, particularly. So
okay.
when I left PwC, and we'll talk a bit about my PwC career, they gave me as a leaving gift a very nice camera and a couple of lenses. And I took it up as a hobby because all of my career had been numerate and writing and traditional skills. And when I was not going to be working full-time, I wanted to do something creative. And I thought, well, I'm never going to sing or play the piano or paint or draw. So I got PwC to buy me a camera.
Nice.
That's my big hobby.
Nice.
So
Okay.
I think I have some talent at it.
Yeah, there you go. That's a hidden one. There you go.
That's a
Now
hidden
you
one.
have an
People wouldn't
answer
know
for
that,
that.
right? There you go.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So growing up, who was your celebrity crush?
This will offend a lot of people, so forgive me. I grew up in the UK, and the person I most admired, well, not a crush, but most wanted to be like, was Margaret Thatcher.
Okay.
Which I know is a very divisive person, and lots of people don't like her. She really resonated with me because she was a woman succeeding in a man's world and made me realize as a youngster and a teenager that women could do anything and could really be the top of their game, whatever it was. So I found it very inspirational.
Yeah,
Quite a celebrity crush, but
yeah, I get it though. Yeah, I think the Margaret Thatcher, you're correct. It depends on who you're talking to and how people feel.
Some
but
people hate her.
I know.
Hate her politics. And so, but I think if you ignore her politics, I think she was a woman in a man's world. She knew what she wanted and went and got it, whether you agree with it or not.
Yeah.
And she really made her mark, and people still talk about her today.
To say, which if you have, you can disagree with her politics.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
can't take away from that, right?
Lots of people disagree with her politics.
Okay.
And some of them I disagree with too. But I really admire what she achieved in terms of the handicap she had against her in those days. She was born in the 40s or 50s when women were just supposed to stay at home and get married and have kids. And look at her, and she went on and forged a career that's still talked about with all around the world.
Okay. All right. And I know you've been in Bermuda for quite some time, and I'm not sure if you have a team or not, but I ask everyone this question. Who is your cut match team?
Oh, that's a really tricky one. I have been in Bermuda a long time, but I don't really follow cut match. I live nearer to St. George's, so I live in Harris Town Road, so I guess that's my team.
Okay.
I've only been to the cut match event twice, but I do usually watch it on TV.
Okay.
So,
all right. So St. George's then.
I guess. Yeah,
all right. I won't be too upset about that, Caroline, but it's okay.
I'm going to say, did I get the colours right? Because I don't like red, I like blue.
Okay.
St. George's the one with two blues?
Yes, St. George's two blues. So then there you go. That's perfect.
That's another reason.
Exactly. All right. So tell me a little bit about you growing up. Like, what did you like to do? What did you like to get involved in? What did you think? Did you always know you were going to be an accountant? Like, tell me about young Caroline.
Sure. Young Caroline. I definitely didn't always want to be an accountant. I used to read a lot. I was a reader. And again, I grew up in the 70s, right? So therefore, again, probably a lot before a lot of your guys listening were around. But I would listen to pop music, I would go to discos and stuff like that, which were all very wholesome in those days. Young people, like young teenagers, like what you call them tweens today.
Yeah.
They'd all go off to discos and we'd have Coke and dance around the room and stuff. So I did a lot of that. I did a lot of reading. When I was at university, you probably wouldn't think of that. So I played in a women's football team.
Really?
So
what was your position?
My position, it was to the left of centre.
Okay.
So centre, left back, right? I don't
Something
even
like
remember.
that, yeah.
Centre forward. Not the person in the middle, not like the captain, one of the ones on one of the sides.
Yes.
And I did that for a term when I was at university. That was great fun.
Yeah.
Because again, it was really groundbreaking because they didn't have women's football in those days. And now when you see like the England team do really well in women's football, it's great to see.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And so when you were finishing school and you were heading off to, did you do college first in the UK?
I went to university from school, So I obviously lived at home with my parents in the UK. I went to university in London, which is what I really wanted to do. And I did my 3 years there. And I, again, less common this side of the world, but in the UK, it's very common that you do a degree in something you're interested in. Yes. that's not so vocational, and then you choose your career.
Yes.
Obviously, if you're doing medicine or law or something, or hopefully engineering, you know what you're doing. But I was a history graduate. So I did history at university because I liked it. I really enjoyed it.
So I have a
like
history
reading and
degree as
writing.
well.
You did history as well?
Yes, I did.
Fancy that. We have a lot in common.
I know.
And I definitely didn't always want to be an accountant, but I wanted to work in the business environment. And I just sort of, as time goes on, I definitely didn't want to teach. All the obvious things about history, right? You're a researcher, you're a teacher, you work in a library. Didn't want to do any of those things. I wanted to work in business. And the one that was easiest to get into when I graduated was accountancy. So I became an accountant. Actually, I think you know, I was with PwC in Bermuda and was a partner there. I actually started my training in the UK with a predecessor firm of PwC.
Okay.
So I sort of came full circle and then joined them again in Bermuda and then became a partner with them here.
Okay. So how did you end up in Bermuda?
I did my 3 years at what was called Coops and Lybrand, now PwC, qualified as an accountant, and I wanted to carry on living in London. But it's a little bit like it is today. It's very difficult to get your foot on the housing ladder if you're paying rent. Because all of your money is going to pay rent, so you can't save for a deposit, so you can't buy anywhere to live. I mean, Bermuda's as bad for young people, but the UK is particularly bad now, much worse than for me. So I thought, I don't want to spend my life renting, but I really want to live in London. So how am I going to get a deposit together? I know, I'll go and work overseas for a couple of years, make some money and come back and get on with my life. And so I said, where am I going to go? Somewhere warm and somewhere that speak English. And it was almost that simple.
Yeah.
So I applied for a job in Australia, in the Cayman Islands, and in Bermuda. And Bermuda was the first one that came back to me. Really that simple. And I'm so glad I came here.
Yeah.
I've been to Cayman a few times while I've been living here, and it's just, I don't want to offend anyone from Cayman listening, but Bermuda is just streets ahead of Cayman, in my opinion. Have you been there?
Yeah, I've been to Cayman once, yes. And I wasn't, I mean, it's difficult when you're from an island, right? You always compare it to where you're from. And let's just say I prefer Bermuda as well.
I definitely prefer, and the main reason I prefer Bermuda is because from almost anywhere you are in Bermuda, you can see the ocean.
Yeah.
And definitely you can see the trees.
Yeah.
Whereas in Cayman, firstly, there are much less trees because it's much drier and hotter.
And it's flat.
And flat. But also, all the beaches and oceans, it feels to me anyway, are all occupied by either private homes or big hotels.
Yes.
So as a normal resident, if you're not staying in a hotel, you haven't got a big house, or you don't have a beach membership, you can't go to the beach.
Yeah.
Whereas everywhere in Bermuda, every person in Bermuda, if they want to go to the beach, can go to the beach.
Yeah.
So I much prefer
that's a really fair point. I never thought of it like that. So you said you were only going to come here for a few years, save up, and how many years later are we now?
We are now, 36 years.
Wow.
Isn't that scary? So I came for 2, and the end of 2, I hadn't saved enough money because I'd spent it all. So I thought I'll save for 2 more.
Okay.
And during the second 2, I met who's now my husband. So we decided to get married and stay here.
Okay.
He had come to Bermuda for 2 years with his parents when he was 10 years old.
Wow.
His parents came for 2 years as well.
And
they stayed forever. And so he grew up here, and then I met him, obviously, and then we decided to make Bermuda our home. We stayed here.
That's amazing. Yeah. So walk me through your career at PwC.
Sure. My career at PwC, I was very lucky with no planning because of the timing. When I came out to join PwC, it was amazing because the insurance industry here was just starting off. So Ace and Excel were just being formed. You know, they're obviously now AXA and Chubb and AXA now. But they were Ace and Excel then. They were brand new companies. And so Bermuda was really just starting to take off in that sphere. We'd always had captives and obviously the tourism industry was going gangbusters at that point, but the insurance industry was new. And so I was able to start working in a new industry on a level playing field with everyone else in Bermuda because nobody else knew much about insurance either. And so therefore the fact I'd come from the UK and didn't know much about insurance was not the handicap it would be if I came today, for example.
Got it.
So I was able to start working with these great companies, and you know as well as I, but insurance companies in Bermuda are always doing exciting things because they're nimble and they come here for the regulatory pragmatism, and they've generally got a lot of dollars in their capital base, and so they're always doing new stuff. They're always startups. They're always pushing the envelope. And so I was able to firstly work with really interesting companies doing really interesting things, but also grow with them. So when I first started working with Excel, for example, as a service provider, they probably had 20 people. So I knew everyone. And then you turn around and 5 years later, they've got 200 people.
Yeah.
You still know everyone.
Yeah.
And that's a really great way to have a career.
Nice.
So I was very lucky in my timing that I grew with the industry.
Okay. And then you stayed in insurance and reinsurance during your time at PwC.
I did, mostly, yeah.
So was the goal always to end in partnership there?
I think so, yes. I mean, now the firms are a lot more, much less of a pyramid. When I was coming through any of the firms, Deloitte, KPMG, PwC, they would all be the same. All of the accountants there, it was an up or out mentality. So either you wanted to be a partner and you were going to become a partner on the track, or you weren't going to become a partner, in which case you probably decided you wanted to leave and go to something else. So for a variety of reasons, either you didn't want the life, or you weren't suited to it, or whatever it may be. If you go and work in industry, you can be the chief accountant forever. You don't have to aspire to be the CFO and the CEO and the chairman.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in a PwC and one of the accounting firms in those days, they almost had a philosophy of up or out. So as long as you were progressing, they wanted you to stay. Once you started progressing, you were often seen as a blocker for the people coming behind. Now the firms are a lot better. Now they have career paths for all sorts of people. Some people want to stay at a certain level. Some people want to go in a different direction. Some people are working in non-accounting parts of the firm.
Yeah.
And they can all have really fulfilling careers. But I think when I was coming through in those days, it was very much, if you didn't want to be a partner or you weren't able to be a partner or for whatever other reason, you probably would self-select out and go and do something else. So the longer I stayed, the more it became obvious it was a track.
Okay. And during that time, when you were coming up, when you were matriculating through PwC, obviously there were more males during that time, but was it just you or were there other women as well?
There are other women in the firm, certainly, but I was the first partner at PwC in Bermuda and probably the second or third partner in any accounting firm in Bermuda.
Wow.
So
that was female.
It was female,
Wow,
yes.
yeah.
So it's quite a lonely role to be in at the beginning. And, I have an anecdote I could share with you of quite significant chauvinism, but generally speaking, my colleagues were incredibly supportive. I mean, they made me a partner, right? They didn't have to do that. And so they were very supportive. There's a couple I could call out who were particularly great to me, really good mentors through my career. But, yes, it was difficult. Challenging is probably a better way of putting it.
Yeah. What were some of the biggest challenges, would you say?
I think you get noticed very quickly. It can be a good thing or a bad thing. So everybody always remembers you. Oh, it's that female partner or, whatever. And that's great when you're doing something good. It's less great when you stumble. And so people always remember.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're one of the guys in a grey suit, people, particularly outside the firm, they don't necessarily remember which one of you it was. Whereas if you're the only female, then of course they remember immediately where you were.
Yeah.
Equally well, they always remember you for good stuff.
Yeah.
So people would then say, we'd like to interview a couple of your partners, maybe a male and a female. Yeah. And so because there's only one female, you always get to do that.
Got it.
So I got a lot of profiling. I got a lot of opportunity to do public speaking at conferences and things like that. It was great. I also got a lot of opportunity to mentor people, which I really, really loved. And now that I don't work full-time in a company, that's actually the thing I miss the most, is having a formal mentoring relationship with people, both men and women. I really enjoy it. So I try and seek out those opportunities for people, and people seek out me as well. And it's great to feel that you can give back, and you can, a little bit like we're doing today, you can just mention a couple of things from your past that might be helpful, or help them think through things. Because if you're in the middle of a challenge, you can't always see straight, or you get quite emotional about it, or whatever it may be. And maybe somebody who's been there, or somebody who isn't so emotionally involved, can actually help you think it through a little bit more.
Yeah.
Have you thought about it this way? Have you considered that actually this person may not just be really horrible, perhaps they're having a bad day, or whatever, and help people reframe it a little bit, which is hopefully useful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to have people like that in your life. You know
I think
what I
it
mean?
is.
Especially professionally, because sometimes when things are happening to us in our professions, we're so close to it. We have these very emotional responses,
we do.
right?
And we tend to take it all very personally.
Exactly.
And it's almost always not personal.
Yeah.
As I said, someone's having a bad day, or they've I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of reasons why they might behave the way they do.
My mom is a business teacher, and she has this like philosophy. She'll be so happy that I've said this. Hopefully she watches this episode. But with her, it's not personal. It's just business, right?
Absolutely.
And so she tells her students that all the time. It's like always a theme of her classroom. And so it's so interesting that you said that, because literally some things are not personal.
They're really not. But
business.
When they're happening to you, you take them personally. And over the years, I definitely took a lot of things personally, which now I look back, I shouldn't have got so excited about it. I really should have just realised it. A, it was nothing personal, or B, I was actually, women particularly, you probably have experiences too. You tend to have the imposter syndrome too. So you tend to think, if I haven't been selected for this, or I haven't won at this, or somebody didn't speak to me about that, it's because I'm not very good at my job. Of course it isn't. They were just walking down the corridor thinking about getting a coffee. They weren't ignoring you. Whereas you tend to internalise all of that.
Yeah.
And, because a little bit of imposter syndrome and all the other things that go with it.
Yeah. And in your career, sometimes, it wasn't as personal, but did you ever encounter times where it was personal because you were a woman?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't do it now, but I'll tell you a story without naming anyone.
Okay.
I've told this story to a few people. I don't know if the person involved ever realised what they actually did, but it wasn't long after I had become a partner at PwC, and we had a visitor, I can't even remember who it was now, coming into the boardroom and met with a few of us, and he sort of said, so how many partners do you have here now? And the guy who was with me said, 12, but it's really just 11 because one of them's a woman.
No way.
Absolutely.
In front of you?
Yeah, absolutely. In front of me, in front of lots of other people too.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, what do you say to that, right? And
Could you imagine if someone said that in 2023?
They'd be fired.
Immediately.
Immediately. Absolutely immediately. But he just sort of laughed and carried on. And to their credit, two of my other male colleagues jumped in and were really forceful with him. Yeah. I didn't actually have to say anything.
That's good.
Which is amazing. I remember it. What, 15 years later, 20 years later?
That's crazy.
I remember it.
Yeah, because something like that is, of course not, but it's so impressionable on you that people don't realize sometimes, oh yeah, you're making a joke, but in actual fact, you look at yourself, well, wait, was I only made a partner,
And you start questioning yourself. Was I only made a partner because I was a woman? Was it counting numbers? Was it the early years of DEI? All that sort of stuff. And of course, I say of course, I am sure none of that was true, but you sort of, all of a sudden, it's the whole imposter thing again. Yeah. But this guy, he probably didn't even remember it 10 minutes later.
Yeah, probably not. But what I love the most about that story is your other co-workers jumping in on your behalf.
Which was great.
Yeah.
A couple of the guys, they were younger than him and my sort of age. They jumped right in and called him out. And that was the best part of the story.
That's amazing. So with, having this kind of pioneering career, right? I mean, when I say that, meaning like, obviously you were the first female partner at PwC and other firms in Bermuda, period. What type of pressure did you feel during that time, if any?
I think it's the always being front and center. If you mess something up, they say, oh, well, it's because you've got a woman. If you had a male partner, that would never have happened. You've always got real pressure not to do female things. So, for example, don't get upset. Don't cry. Don't be emotional. So that was the pressure I always felt. I had to be better than everybody else all the time to prove that they were right to have given me the opportunity. And so that's. I mean, lots of people feel that today still, of course. But it was just very noticeable. If I said to you now, how many female partners are there in accounting firms in Bermuda, you probably don't know the answer, and I don't either. But I tell you, it's quite a lot. Whereas if you'd asked somebody that 20 years ago, they'd have named 2 or 3 people. Wow. And everybody knew who they were. And it wasn't just the accounting firms, of course, it was the law firms as well. Period, all of those professional practice firms.
Yeah. So given that we have made progress in this space in terms of gender
really
balance, is there anything that you are still a little disappointed with in terms of the progress that we've made with gender parity and balance in Bermuda, period, across the sectors?
I guess the thing it'd be less about gender and more about race, I think, which I'm still disappointed with in Bermuda, where we haven't got the racial parity we should have. I believe that everyone now is trying really focusing on it. DEI is a big buzzword. Everyone talks about it. We have the Dive-In Festival, all sorts of things like that. But it is taking a very long time. Maybe it took a very long time to get the first few females as well. But because I was one of them, if I was my mother's generation, I'd probably feel very differently. Yeah. But I was very lucky. I was again, timing is everything. Timing of me coming to Bermuda was great. Timing of me entering the workforce and being a female. I had opportunities generations before me couldn't even dream of. Yeah. And I think we're we're on that journey, but we're not quite where we need to be in terms of black and white in Bermuda as well.
No, I agree with you. And I think, when you look at the wider community of Bermuda outside of the insurance and reinsurance industry, it's so interesting because our wider community is a completely different racial balance than it is inside in
international business. That's absolutely right.
And it's so unique in that way because in other parts of the world, in the UK, in the US, a lot of times it's more difficult for them to understand that because it's very different in the wider community as well.
Sure.
But here it's like, no, it's the complete opposite. So it's very interesting that you said that, we haven't made that much progress. We do have so much more to go, and we have done some things.
We've done a lot. It's also the further you come, the more you realize you have to go. And I think one of the challenges in Bermuda's international business sector is that we don't have very large companies. So if you have 200 people in Bermuda, you're a really big company. If you are in the UK or the US, you'd have 5,000 people. And obviously, the bigger you are, the flatter is the pyramid.
Yeah.
So there are more entry-level opportunities, and therefore there are more people coming into them, and there are more opportunity to progress up.
Yeah.
Whereas Bermuda international companies tend to be quite pointed, and that they, as I mentioned earlier with insurance and reinsurance, they tend to be the more senior people here, whereas the more junior people would be back in the UK or the US or wherever it is.
Yeah.
And so that's, by definition, you don't have the same number of entry-level jobs, which creates a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I think we are doing better.
We are definitely doing better.
Definitely can say that, but I do agree with you that there are things that we could be a bit more intentional about.
Absolutely, very much intentional. And I think, and coming back to gender, I think the forward-thinking companies like the PwCs of the world today, they are very much more forward-thinking in terms of gender and indeed about race. They've changed exponentially in 20 years. There's all sorts of different career paths for genders and for different people wanting to do different things. There's much bigger intern programs. Again, if I shouldn't really be speaking for PwC because I don't work there anymore, but I do follow them on their social media and LinkedIn and stuff. And so when I was there, we maybe had 4 interns a year out of 200. And now they probably had 25 interns a year out of 200.
Yeah.
And that's a huge difference. And the more interns you bring in, obviously the more opportunities you're bringing to the local population.
Definitely.
Be they black or white.
Yeah.
I think that's really good.
It is good. And it also, it also builds a pipeline of talent, right? So when people are coming in as well.
And there's a whole thing about if you don't see it, you can't be it, and so on.
Exactly.
More and more people now know people who are working in the business sector. And so if you see that, you can feel you can aspire to it. Whereas if you don't see it, it's much more difficult to see yourself in that role.
Yeah.
Which again comes back to being one of the first women to do things and the Margaret Thatcher inspiration. Having seen Margaret Thatcher do stuff, and if you were a young black Bermudian female here, you might see someone like Pamela Banks or Patricia Gordon-Pamplin or Paula Cox, and see that as your inspiration.
Absolutely. No, I completely
Dame Jennifer,
agree with you.
all of these people.
Absolutely.
They've been inspirational, I hope, in similar ways to the community here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, on the journey of your career during PwC and you ascending into partnership, you obviously married during this time. How did you do both? Because obviously being an accountant is really a demanding job.
Yep.
And then having a family as well. Tell me a bit about how that was for you.
It was a challenge, but I was fortunate or unfortunate, but in terms of managing it, didn't have young children. So I didn't have children myself. I had a stepson, but he didn't live with us full time. Obviously, he had his mother. And so he was 10 when I came along. So I missed all the sleepless nights and baby things, which made it much easier, of course, in terms of managing a career. But certainly I remember some of my younger colleagues saying to me, it's all right for you being a partner because you don't have kids. You can make it happen. You can focus on your career. And I think that was the case then. Now, of course, it's very different. Men and women want to focus on family and career. How do you make it work? I think it's a fallacy to say you can have it all, but I think you can have it all, but not at the same time.
Yeah.
And one thing that people can sometimes forget is that your career, whether you take a break or have kids or don't, is very long. And most people will start working in their early 20s and will stop working in their early or late 60s. That's a 40-year career. So if you take 5 years out or even 10 years out, it actually doesn't matter. Gone are the days, I hope, where you need to achieve this by this age, because now it doesn't matter. So if, for example, you want to take a career break and bring up kids, or you want to take a career break and help your father because he's elderly, you can do that and you can still have it all. What you maybe can't do is have it all this year.
Yeah. Which I think is a really good point to make. Like, I think we are changing the narrative a bit about having it all, but I love how you said you may not have it all this year, but it may happen throughout your
It'll
span.
happen throughout your time.
Yeah.
And at times, other things are important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know, pick an example. If you're a young person and you're really into sport, well, maybe you don't. Maybe you want a job that's reasonably 9 to 5 and reasonably consistent, because it's really important to you to go and train a couple of nights a week and play your sport on the weekend and be able to take some time off and go and compete for Bermuda or whatever it might be. And at this point in your life, when you're at a point where you can be really professionally competitive at sport, then maybe your career takes a little bit of a backseat and you focus on that.
Yeah.
And then maybe when your sporting days are a little bit more behind you, then you focus a bit on your career or you focus on your family or whatever. But gone are the days, I think, where you had to achieve everything by the time you were 35 or 40. And if you weren't keeping up your peer group, you fell behind and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't really talked about age disparities as well, but we've talked about gender and race.
Yeah.
But I think age as well is really important. You now have working populations of people. Once you get past the intern stage, people of all sorts of different levels. People are going out and coming back. And
Career
it's all very
shifting.
fluid.
Yeah.
Take some time off and go do something else. I met a month or so ago with Arlene Brock, who you may know. She was a former ombudsman.
Yes.
And then she left Bermuda for a while and she went back to university and she did a whole bunch of things. And then she went to work in Africa. And now she's coming back to Bermuda and now she's doing charitable work. So, you know, she's my sort of age. But the point being, you can do various things. Careers used to be straight lines and now they're far more zigzag.
Yes.
So you can do anything and be anything you want, but you maybe can't do it all at once.
Yeah. Definitely. So I want to shift a bit into your transition from PwC into your board work, and I believe we call it non-executive director.
We do.
So what was...
Non-executive just means part-time.
Yeah. So you're part-time. I'm just joking. So what was the shift in that? Were you just ready to leave PwC at the time, or did you just see this opportunity on the board side of things?
A little bit of both. So the opportunity was there, and I think being a non-executive, you can be a non-executive. Most people are probably not very qualified to be non-executives early in their career because you need to have done stuff as an executive before you can be a credible non-executive. And I said jokingly, non-executive is part-time. It is, but it's also by definition not full-time in the business. So an executive person is all over it, running the company. A non-executive person is slightly away so that they can apply a different sort of oversight. That's really what it means there. So by definition, I think you can't be a non-executive when you're young because you haven't had enough experience in whatever it is. So it tends to be people who are sort of over 40, maybe even over 50. I think we don't have so many people now in their 70s and 80s, which they used to have back in the day. So the transition was partly opportunistic in that I was around about 50. And I thought, what do I want to do for the next 10 to 15 years of my life? Do I want to carry on with PwC or be a full-time executive role in the insurance industry, for example? And I decided I wanted to have a different life. I felt at that point I'd spent a lot of my career advising clients, because that's what you do, places like PwC, and attending board meetings and going to boardrooms. You know, when you and I first met, I was on the board of the BDA, and you were working in the BDA. And so therefore I was a non-executive there, and that gives you the opportunity to have a bit more of a portfolio career. Because when you're an executive, you work in a company, BDA, XL, PwC, whatever it is. When you're a non-executive, you work with several, and you get a little bit of diversity, which is great, diversity of experience, I mean. You do get, quite frankly, a different work-life balance. So I sit on 5 boards, and I probably work about 30% of the year, but not in a block. So this week and last week I was very busy. Next week I'm traveling for business, and then I have about 3 weeks when I have no board meetings. So I'll be spending that time thinking, reading, writing, but not full time. And so I have that sort of ability to balance my life. So depending on what's going on with the company, somewhere between a third and a half. And when the company's going through challenges, good challenges or bad challenges, you also need to spend a lot more time with them. So we were talking just before we started recording about COVID.
Yeah.
So during my COVID time, I was on 5 boards. It's a different 5 boards I'm on now. Yeah. But each of them was having challenges during COVID. So it was basically a very full-time job. So one of them was an insurance company having challenges with the insurance policies it written in COVID, and whether they covered losses or whether they didn't. Another one was an investment company, which some of its investments, value just fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
And then a third one, the top 3 people in the company were all hospitalized with COVID. And so you think you've got a succession plan. If the CEO goes under a bus, then the CFO can step in. But if they're all on ventilators in hospital, then all of a sudden, so we had the chairman of the company having to step in.
Oh, wow.
And then I stepped up to take the chairman's job, and you do a little bit of musical chairs. So for that 12, 18-month period, I was really, really busy. So were lots of other people.
Yeah.
Whereas now, the companies I'm on the board of are all in a steady state, and so I'm not working crazily busy. I think I mentioned to you this week. So I'm attending board meetings tomorrow and Tuesday in Bermuda. Got some people flying in from London. Some people are in Bermuda joining me at the meeting. This morning I met with the London guys to chat about the next couple of days. Tonight we have a kick-off dinner. Monday and Tuesday we have 2 more dinners. So it's actually a very sort of busy 3 or 4 days, if you will. And then, as I said, next week I'm traveling, and last week I was busy as well. So it's not just, if you think about most non-executive roles, I've got board meetings 4 to 6 times a year, usually 2 days. And you add that up, and you think, how many days is that? Well, I work on the principle, if it's a 1-day meeting, I'll spend 2 days preparing for it, and probably half a day debriefing from it. So it actually takes
about
4 or 5 days or a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what you need to do. Again, gone are the days, I hope, where you read the papers on the plane, you turn up at the meeting, you say a few things, you have lunch, and you leave again.
Mm-hmm.
Those sort of directors and those sort of boards are not very effective. They're not the ones I do sit on or that I want to sit on.
Yeah. So how often do you change over in boards? Like you mentioned you were on different boards during COVID and then now, and then once in answering that question as well, like, can you be effective on a board if you stay on too long?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
The UK has a rule, which is a maximum of 9 years. The US and by extension Bermuda doesn't have that same rule. They just have a general indication, which is the US way is we want on the board as a whole, we want some people who are quite new and some people who've been there a while, so we've got a mix of experience. The UK has a view of once you've been there for certainly 9, but maybe even 6, you're starting to become a little bit too familiar with everything, and so you're stopping to be so critical of stuff. I mean, critical in a positive way.
Yeah.
Then we want to change you out. So I would say, generally speaking, everybody can always persuade themselves that they're exceptional and they need to stay. And every company can persuade themselves that this person's really good and we want them to stay. But I think it's actually quite good to have a fixed tenure, whatever that is. It could be 9 years or 12 years or 15 years. Whatever it is, it should be a fixed tenure, and only in exceptional circumstances would you extend it. Because people are not as good as they used to be. There's a little bit of a learning curve. You join a board, and 2 years in, you think, oh, wow, I didn't realise that when I first joined. You actually learn a lot.
Yes.
And then you contribute massively, I hope, for the next 5 or 6 or 7 years, and then it starts tailing off at the other end as well, because then you're becoming a bit stale.
Yeah.
So unless the company's doing lots of massive new things, then you sort of can become a little bit stale because you've been there a while. And so I think a refreshment and a tenure is good, and a mixture of tenures on the board is good. So if you have a couple of people who've been there a couple of years, a couple have been there, been maybe about 10, and a couple in the middle, I think that's a healthy balance. And it tends to, by definition, be age as well. So people who have been there longer tend to be older, and people who've been there less tend to be younger. And then you have the skills mix and the gender mix and the race mix and all of those things. So the best functioning boards are very diverse in the broadest sense.
So what's the sweet spot of tenure on a board, would you say?
For me, depends on company, depends on the person. If I joined a board when I was 65, I think I would do an absolute max of 10 years, probably more like 7. If I joined a board when I was 50, I think then 10 to 15 would be fine. I think it depends on you, and it depends what the company's doing. If you have a company that's going through a lot of change and a lot of acquisition, a lot of growth, I think there's a lot of benefit in having people who've been on that journey with you.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got a company in a steady state, I think it makes more sense to change up so that you have different perspectives around the table all the time.
Yeah. So given all this wealth of knowledge that you have and experience from your career and now your non-executive director career that you have, because I feel like that's a second career
It
that
very
you
much
definitely
is a second
have.
career, that's right.
Like, what would be some advice you would give to someone who may be on a similar path, not necessarily via accounting, but in their career like that, to a young woman who's looking at or listening to this and saying, maybe that's something I could do. What's something that you would give to her in this moment?
You mean to become a non-executive?
Yeah.
I think focus first on doing a really good job at your executive career. Because to be credible, I mean, there's always people who need non-executives, and third sector charities are always needing people. But I think to be credible, you've got to have some executive experience behind you. If you haven't, then you haven't experienced things that are helpful around the board. So when you're sitting around the board table and there's a problem, I don't know, could be any sort of a problem, right? A staffing issue or a branding issue or a financial issue. I think if you've experienced either through your work directly or through your consulting work, you've experienced something there. It won't be exactly the same, but directionally the same. Then you can have a really good perspective to add. Whereas I think if you're quite young in your career, all you really have to bring to a non-executive role is an ability to work hard, which is very valuable, but it's not the only thing. So I would say, don't be impatient. Give yourself a little bit of time. I had lunch with a young man at one of my companies I sit on the board with a couple of months ago, and he was interested in a non-executive career, and he was only 32. And I think this is a wrong conversation to be having. By all means, think about it as an aspiration in 10, 15 years' time, but right now you should be focusing on building your executive career.
Yeah.
Don't think about it as being a good gig because it's only relatively part-time and so on. It's hard work.
It's hard work, and you have to bring more to the table. You know what I mean? Like you said, your experience is actually what is the most valuable during your executive time.
Absolutely, it's your experience and your ability, and it's also your personal skills. It's your ability and willingness to. I have two jobs really as a non-exec. You have two jobs. One is to support the management team, and one is to challenge the management team. And by doing both of those things, what you're doing is you're representing the investors and the shareholders who are not in the room. So if they were all in the room, that's what they would be doing. If they were all in the room, the management team would get nothing done.
Yeah.
So the shareholders elect a small group of people, 5, 8, whatever, to do their job for them, delegate it effectively. And as I said, every time I go to a board meeting, I have two jobs: to support the management team when they deserve it. So you probe them and you make sure that their strategy is on track, and have they thought about this, and have they thought about that, or if they're going through a cultural challenge, or if they're having problems, you support them and you sort of put your arm around them as a hug and sort of say, this will pass, whatever. And then it's also challenging. Really? Are you sure we want to expand in there? Because based on everything I read, there seems to be quite a crowded field. Are you sure it makes sense? Have we done the research? Have we got the right people? All that sort of stuff. So those are the two things you should remember walking into the room: constructive challenge and support.
Definitely.
Know when to do which one.
Yeah, definitely. You gotta be, heavy-handed.
And then there's all the other
sometimes.
things like being prepared to commit the time, being passionate about the business. I would not want to sit on a board that I didn't believe in the business, for example. So that's almost the first thing. Do I believe in the business? Do I think it's going to be successful? It may not be financial success. Maybe it's successful in another way, but do I believe it's been successful? And the other key thing about a non-executive, which is a bit like working in a company, but even more important, I think, as a non-exec, is do you like and trust the people, and can you have influence? Because if you don't like and trust them, when things go wrong, which they will, nobody's got your back, right? Whereas that's why we do these things like dinners and travel together and spend a lot of time, because when things are difficult, you've built a relationship. So one of the reasons I'm here today is because we met years ago and we built a relationship.
Yes.
And we haven't been very active at keeping in touch, but when you reach out, I know you immediately and you know me, and we have some idea about what we can talk about. That takes time to build that relationship. Yeah. So to just not have that relationship with your fellow board members is a missed opportunity, really. Yeah. But it also enables you to be more successful. And then the final one is, can I make a difference? Two things. Have I got the skills to make a difference? If they need someone who's very good at engineering, I'm not going to be able to make a difference, right? But other things I'm good at, can I make a difference? Do I have the skills? And do I think they'll listen to me? Is it a culture where they're open-minded? Is it one where they are interested in hearing different perspectives around the table? Is it a collegial and supportive, non-toxic environment? Yeah. And in all of those issues, if the answer to that is tick, 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 then yes, you think about whether it's something you want to do.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I'm actually very intrigued because you hear about this non-executive director role and so many people aspire to it and you don't really realize what it takes to do it. And I think the key of what I'm getting from you here is the skill the skill side of it, right? Like a lot of people are doing,
Absolutely.
and no disrespect to the IOD course, but a lot of people are just doing it thinking that that is the key to get into the door, not realizing that that executive work that you do is actually the major key to help you with that.
You're quite right. The IOD courses are great, but they're primarily great for people who haven't had senior executive careers, I think. I've done a couple of them. I've not done the certification. I thought, I've had enough exams.
I think you're
I don't do another one. But I enjoyed the courses. I learnt from them. But there are people doing it as a way to get a non-executive role. Whereas I think the way I would view it as it's a way to be better at doing your non-executive role, rather than ticking a box and getting a bit like, I've got my A-level or I've got my degree or whatever it is, tick, now I'm qualified. You don't really want to be looking at it that way. It's more... There's some basics, like what are my legal obligations and those sorts of things. But it's a whole range of stuff. So I wouldn't decry the IOD course, but it's only one tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I mean, I can't believe we're almost. I mean, we've done about 45 minutes here, so we're going to just wrap up quickly. Sure. But essentially, I always ask this when I leave, when people leave the couch here, and it's essentially what I want to know from you is when you're no longer with us and you've had some time, and people say, Caroline Foulger, and they're talking about you. What is something that you want them to say about you? Like, what do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered for making a contribution, and that's sometimes for people in helping them with advice or helping with mentoring or stuff like that, or sometimes it's about having a good idea. So those are the things I want to be remembered for. I remember Caroline because when I met her and we were doing this together, she really helped me. That's what I want to be remembered for. Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, I can't believe the time went by so quickly.
I can't either.
I know,
it's amazing.
It's 5 o'clock and I told you you'd be out of here by 5. But thank you so much for spending some time with me. Yeah, it was really great. And I think you've given a perspective to people that we would have never had. People would never have even thought of when it comes to your career. I'm sure most people don't even know who you are. They've heard the name and never been able to put a face to it. And I'm just glad that you really took the time to do this with me today.
Actually,
Genuinely
I loved it. Far more
honored.
than I expected. That was great. It was a really good conversation. Very comfortable.
Perfect.
And thank you for doing that so well. You're very good. You're a natural at it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No.
All right. Thank you so much once again. All right, guys. We just had a great conversation with Caroline Foulger. And if you want to learn more about her, you can reach out to her on LinkedIn. She's very active on LinkedIn there if you want to learn more or to see a bit more about her career. Also have her bio up on the website. So make sure you head over to hustleherpodcast.com where you will be able to see, obviously, the episode as well as some show notes. And we'll also have the blog up where we spoke a little bit more about the things that Caroline and I chatted about here today. So as always, a big thank you to our sponsors, Brown & Company and 59 Front. If you guys haven't been over to 59 Front, just like Caroline has, to get some of her skincare products, make sure you head over there to look for some of your skincare products and all of those needs that you may have. As always, thank you for spending some time with me today. And thank you for watching Hustle Her Podcast.